Bonjour et bienvenue à notre rendez-vous quotidien pour la presse en ligne et en direct sur EBS. Nous sommes le mercredi 13 janvier. Je voudrais d'abord passer la parole à Sonia pour une annonce sur nos investissements dans le secteur de l'espace.
Good afternoon. Today, the Commission is partnering up with the European Investment Fund to attract 300 million euros to invest into the EU space sector, with 100 million directly stemming from the EU budget. The EAS participation is backed by the European Fund for Strategic Investments, which is the main pillar of the investment plan for Europe. This investment concerns two space tech-focused funds, Orbital Ventures and Primal Space, under the first ever EU-backed equity pilot in the space sector, the so-called InnovFin Space Equity Pilot. The main aim of this investment is to support groundbreaking innovation in the space sector. For more details, please consult our daily news. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. Then I would like to remind you that Commissioner Kyriakides is today participating in the informal video conference of EU health ministers, which is ongoing as we speak. Discussions focus on the state of play of the EU's strategy to fight the pandemic and of the vaccine rollout in different member states. Representatives from ECDC and EMA will also or are also participating. And Commissioner Kyriakides will take part in a press conference at the end of the meeting, which is foreseen to take place shortly around 12:30. You can watch the press conference live on EBS Plus, and I would ask you to address your questions on health-related questions, of course, to this press conference. Finalement, avant de passer à vos questions, je tiens à vous informer que nous n'aurons pas de rendez-vous de midi demain en raison de la tenue du séminaire du Collège des commissaires qui se tient demain, mais bien entendu, nous restons à votre disposition pour vos questions. Et avec ceci, nous pouvons passer à vos questions. And I pass the floor to Athanasios.
Thanks very much. There is some delay. I don't know why. Okay, now we're okay. Thanks very much. We hear and we read stories in Greece about customers ordering by mail from the UK and having to pay quite steep custom duties these days. For instance, one case says that a customer had to pay €45 for a €65 mail order. In order for his packets to be cleared in customs. So could you please remind us what is the norm, what is the framework for these kind of cases before the implementation of the trade agreement, which, if I'm not mistaken, foresees zero duties and should be ready by now by some kind of, I remember we had some kind of interim measures also that should have been in place. What was it? Please remind us what is the framework. Thanks.
Yes, we have provisional application of the agreement since the 1st of January. On customs duties, I pass the floor. This is now a trade agreement, trade question, so I will pass the floor first to Miriam.
Yes, good morning. Indeed, the agreement does eliminate all customs duties, so there should be no more customs duties applicable between the EU and UK. What could happen is the VAT. Of course, the VAT still applies, but maybe my colleague Dan, who has been following this more closely, has more details.
If I can just say, it's not a question of there not being customs duties anymore. There have never been duties, obviously, since the UK was part of the single market and has moved seamlessly to an agreement where there are no customs duties. Dan, on VAT, since this is also your patch, apart from your Brexit hat.
Hi, Eric, and thanks, Athanasios, for your question. Indeed, I would just confirm what Miriam has said. In terms of the agreement, it is tariff-free, quota-free, as you rightly point out. Of course, this does not mean that there is going to be continued frictionless trade, as there was when the UK was a member state of the European Union or during the transition period last year. Of course, there are going to be changes. Of course, there may be additional charges, administrative charges, or indeed the big topic here is VAT, in which customers will have to pay. Now, exactly the rules in which the interim measures, to quote your own question, I think what you were talking about there is what is covered under the withdrawal agreement for goods that are currently, let's say, in transit on New Year's Eve. But that is only a very limited case. So I think there's nothing much more to say there. Beyond that, of course, we've seen all of the different reports about customers facing difficulties or being charged various different things. I can't obviously comment on each and every one of those commercial decisions. All I can say very generally is that, of course, there will be additional friction now. Of course, there may be additional charges. And of course, this is going to cause people difficulty over the coming months and years.
Thank you. Athanasios, you have a follow-up.
So if I get that straight, there could be friction, there could be additional charges, but not custom duties. There could be VAT, but there was no custom duties and there are not going to be any. Is that clear?
That is 100% crystal clear. That was the whole foundation of the discussion with the United Kingdom. There are no customs duties, just like there were no customs duties, obviously, during the transition period when the UK was still part of the single market. Yes. Okay, let's stick with questions related to the agreement. Are there other questions related to this? Please only keep your hand raised if it is the case, so that we can close this issue. So only questions on the agreement with the United Kingdom. Philippe.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's on Bosnia and in particular Canton Unazana and the Lipa refugee camp. Do you have any new information of the situation there, in particular on whether the EU funding has made a change to the situation? And secondly, are there any refugees, do you know of, who came to the near Croatian border and applied for asylum in the European Union? Thank you.
Philip, thank you very much for your question, but I think I was crystal clear in saying that for the moment we were sticking to questions related to the agreement with the United Kingdom and Brexit more generally. So we will come back to you later. Thank you for your patience. So other questions related to Brexit. Thomas, your question is slightly different. I will take it later. Let me come to Verena. Verena, you have the floor. Verena is no longer.
Yes, I am.
Ah,
yes,
voilà.
I am.
Sorry, there was a bit of delay.
Sorry, there was a bit of delay. Yes, there always is somehow. Thanks for taking my question. I'm Verena with the German Press Agency. I was wondering, Dan, if there could be an issue with the country of origin topic, because there are custom duties for products that aren't originating from the UK proper. So maybe you could fill us in on that or remind us of the specialty there. Thank you.
Yes, it's a good comment. Let me pass the floor again to Miriam on this.
Yes, so under the trade agreement with the UK, we have, of course, negotiated rules of origin. So only products originating in the UK will be authorized to benefit from the non-tariff duties that are existing in the trade agreement. On the contrary, this is a change compared to what existed in the past. So if the products are not complying with the rules of origin that have been agreed, then they will have to pay the full MFN tariff. So it depends on the type of products, but indeed the rules of origin will apply. And this is a change compared with what we had before with the UK.
Yes, thanks for this question, Verena, because you're right, it's a very important point. We, in answering the question, we were focusing on goods originating from the UK that comply with the rules of origin, but you're absolutely right to specify that, of course, if the products are actually not really UK goods according to the rules of origin definitions that we have, that they come through the UK, then it's a different story that applies. But I think it was a question of semantics more than of substance. But it's very important. You're right to specify that. So thank you for that question. Athanasios, I think this provides an important clarification on your question as well. Thomas, we now come to you.
Oui, merci Eric. Depuis que vous avez fait l'accord avec le Royaume-Uni, de plus en plus de voix s'élèvent en Suisse pour dire, ben voilà, on devrait faire la même chose. Les Britanniques ont obtenu non pas l'obligation de la Cour de justice et tout ça. Par exemple, hier, la Commission de politique extérieure du Sénat suisse, qui s'appelle Conseil des États, a demandé au gouvernement de comparer les deux modèles, donc le modèle accord avec le Royaume-Uni et le modèle accord cadre. Alors ma question est très simple. Est-ce que la Suisse peut aspirer à avoir le même deal comme les Britanniques ou c'est du temps perdu de réfléchir à ça? Merci.
Thomas, merci beaucoup de ta question, mais je crois que la situation est claire. Il y a un accord entre la Suisse et l'Union européenne. Les négociations, comme je m'échine à le répéter ici jour après jour, ont été conclues. Donc, nous n'avons pas de demande pour négocier un autre type d'accord de la part des autorités suisses. Nous avons des demandes pour des clarifications concernant certains points de l'accord qui a été négocié. Mais pour rappel, il y a une différence de nature très importante entre l'accord que nous avons conclu avec les Suisses et l'accord du Royaume-Uni. Dans le cadre de l'accord avec la Suisse, il s'agit de renforcer cette fameuse relation bilatérale entre l'Union européenne et la Suisse et en fait l'intégration, dont bénéficie la Suisse dans le marché, l'intégration dont bénéficie la Suisse dans le marché unique, son accès au marché unique, alors que dans le cadre de l'accord que nous avons signé avec le Royaume-Uni, c'est le mouvement inverse. Le Royaume-Uni est sorti du marché unique avec toutes les conséquences que cela implique et dont nous venons de discuter d'ailleurs à l'instant en ce qui concerne certains aspects relatifs par exemple aux règles d'origine. Donc ce sont deux accords qui vont dans des directions diamétralement opposées. Maintenant, bien entendu, il revient aux autorités suisses de faire une analyse des deux accords. Mais en ce qui nous concerne, il nous semble que l'accord que nous avons signé avec la Suisse va dans le sens d'un approfondissement de notre relation et non pas d'un éloignement, comme ça a été le cas avec le Royaume-Uni. Tu as une question de suivi? Thomas, je te repasse la parole.
Oui, non, c'était juste pour dire qu'en fait, l'accord avec la Suisse n'a pas encore été signé. Le gouvernement suisse n'a même pas voulu donner l'autorisation à son négociateur de parapher le texte.
Certes, mais les négociations sur cet accord ont été conclues et tu sais très bien, comme je l'ai dit ici hier encore, que nous avons appelé et nous continuons d'appeler les autorités suisses à prendre les mesures pour justement le signer et le faire ratifier, même si, bien entendu, nous sommes tout à fait disposés à discuter des clarifications que les autorités suisses nous ont demandées. Je pense que tu conviendras avec moi qu'il y a une différence entre une demande de la part des autorités suisses de demander des clarifications et les discussions qui ont lieu dans certains cénacles suisses que tu as mentionnés sur un type d'accord complètement différent. Voilà, je pense que nous pouvons clôturer ce dossier et je viens maintenant à Diego qui avait été, je crois, le second à lever sa main ce matin. Diego, tu as la parole. Et bienvenue.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, et bienvenue en salle de presse. Je crois que c'est la première fois que nous avons l'occasion.
Merci beaucoup.
Question.
Ouais. So I'll do it in English. It's a question for Stefan on vaccines. It's quite a simple one. It's related to the MEP's access to the contracts. And my first one was a few layers. First one is it still the case that MEPs only have access to one of the contracts? Why just one? Why are the conditions so strict for those accesses? And do you think that for the sake of the vaccine campaign, it wouldn't be a good thing? It would be a good thing to make this a bit more open and therewith also transparent. Thank you.
Diego, thank you very much. As I said in my introduction, there is a press conference in 10 minutes with the commissioner in charge of health. And therefore, the custom is that questions related to the portfolio of a commissioner who is holding a press conference are asked at that occasion. That being said, I believe that we have answered all those questions on numerous occasions here in the press room, and also Sandra Gallina has answered those questions yesterday as well during her intervention, during her hearing in the European Parliament. So let us move away from questions related to health, and I come back to Philip and his question on Bosnia. Philip, if we could ask you to repeat the question, and Peter will answer. Philip, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you, and sorry for not paying attention for 5 minutes ago. So my question was about Bosnia and the situation in Canton Unazana and the Lipa refugee camp. Do you have any new information on that? Secondly, do you have information on whether people from there came to the Croatian border and asked for asylum in the European Union? Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. While it's not, I think, really for us to provide information about developments on the ground on this issue, I can say that the migration situation, not only in Unsko-Sanski canton in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also overall in Bosnia and Herzegovina, became one of the dominating issues currently in the relations between the European Union and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Earlier this week, High Representative Borrell had a phone call with the chairman of the presidency, with Milorad Dodik, and he stressed the need to find solutions urgently and the need for authorities in the country at all levels to take and assume the responsibility for the migration situation in the country and scale up their actions. Now we understand that the situation in Lipa camp is slightly improving because heating was provided in the military tents. There are supplies of water and also access to medical staff, but this is not enough. The situation really needs to have sustainable solution, and there is a lot to do from the side of the authorities of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The EU is, of course, ready to assist. We are continuing our assistance. The assistance is flowing in, and thanks to this engagement and assistance of the European Union, at least this slight improvement was possible, and we continue our engagement. So once again, the authorities in the country, they need to ensure that water and electricity connections are really provided on a full scale and that there is unhindered humanitarian access to partners and also to media and civil society, because this is really important issue and important thing which is going on and it needs to be solved. And we also are appealing on our partners in Bosnia and Herzegovina to find a really sustainable migration system and to establish such system and ensure the fair distribution of all the migrants in the country, across the country, including Republika Srpska and including the Croat majority cantons.
Thank you. I believe you also had a question on Croatia. Adalbert tells me that he has been in contact with you on this question and has asked that you contact the Croatian authorities on your question. Are there other questions for us today related to this issue? Please only keep your hand raised if it is on this issue. David, tu as une question sur ce sujet même.
Oui, merci Eric, parce que selon des articles de presse, les autorités, la police bosniaque a des documents qui disent que le gouvernement croate, avec plein connaissance de la part de l'Union européenne, a effectué des pushbacks, je ne me rappelle plus le terme en français, de 15 000 migrants vers la Bosnie-Herzégovine dans les 2 dernières années. Donc voilà, je ne sais pas si c'est Peter ou pas qui doit répondre à ça, parce que c'est aussi une question de migration interne. Mais est-ce que vous assumez la responsabilité en quelque sorte de ces refoulements, voilà le terme, et de la situation qui y a en ce moment en Bosnie? Merci.
I think this is more a question for Adalbert then, so I will pass him the floor, but we will then come back to other foreign affairs related questions. Sorry for the merry-go-round on the podium. Adalbert.
Merci beaucoup David. Je n'ai pas connaissance du rapport spécifique auquel tu fais référence, donc je ne peux pas dans l'immédiat faire de commentaires là-dessus, mais sur la question des rapports ou des allégations sur les refoulements par les autorités croates, nous avons eu déjà l'opportunité d'échanger plusieurs fois ici, et peut-être que je peux apporter quelques nouveaux éléments, puisque comme tu le sais, il y a un processus en cours des discussions entre la Commission et les autorités croates pour établir un mécanisme indépendant de monitoring aux frontières entre la Croatie et d'autres États. Nous avons eu en novembre une série de réunions en ligne avec différentes parties prenantes en Croatie, ainsi qu'avec le ministère de l'Intérieur, ainsi que également une visite par les services de la Commission aux 2 postes frontières également en novembre. Ces réunions ont continué avec comme objectif d'établir un Memorandum of Understanding, donc un protocole d'accord, merci beaucoup Eric, sur donc un mécanisme de monitoring indépendant selon les objectifs qui sont dans le nouveau pacte sur la migration et l'asile. Et ces réunions, des réunions au niveau technique ont eu lieu en décembre et en janvier cette année. Elles continuent. Pour rappel, les autorités croates se sont engagées à mener des enquêtes sur les rapports qui sont dans les médias sur ce qui se passe aux frontières externes, ainsi que sur justement l'établissement de ce mécanisme indépendant de monitoring. Donc le travail continue.
Merci Adalbert. Y a-t-il d'autres questions sur la situation en Bosnie? Je n'en vois pas, donc nous allons revenir aux affaires internationales. Avez-vous des questions pour Peter sur les affaires internationales? Foreign relations. Stéphane, your question is on foreign relations. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Stefan Grober, Euronews. Does the Commission share the Foreign Minister of Luxembourg's assessment that Donald Trump is a criminal who must be brought before a court?
Peter.
Well, the position of the European Commissioner of of the European Union about what is going on in the United States and the behavior of its representatives and internal developments are best dealt with by the internal institutions of this country. So we expressed on numerous occasions our trust and confidence into the system of checks and balances and rule of law system in the United States, and that's our position. So whatever issue the United States might have inside, they should be able to deal with them based on the instruments available in the country.
Stefan, you have a follow-up.
Yeah, so you're not sharing the assessment of the foreign minister of Luxembourg that Donald Trump is a criminal. It's a yes or no.
No, it's often not a yes or no. Peter's answer is very clearly that it is for the United States authorities that are competent to determine this to make a judgment on it, not for the European Union as such. Are there other foreign relations related questions for us today? Alexandra. Alexandra, there is a mic source issue. Let's see if you can fix it. Yes, it should be working now. Nope. My system says it's working, but clearly there is an issue. I'm sorry for that. Let's give it one last try, see if you can change your source once more. Alexandra, we seem to be having an issue with your mic, so apologies for that, but we will ask you to contact Peter bilaterally on this issue. Okay, other questions for us today on non-foreign affairs related issues? Léa.
Hi, Léa Marchal from Agence Europe. 60 MEPs yesterday addressed a letter to the Commission asking for a compensation fund for economic sectors affected by trade sanctions, namely the sectors affected by US sanctions. Is the Commission working on something? Do they have an answer for this request from the Parliament? Thank you.
That would be a question for Miriam.
Yes, thank you. I confirm that we have received this letter and we are looking into it. We are seeing what are the options and we will reply in due time. I would also like to take this opportunity to highlight that, in fact, we have extended the compensation fund we established last year during the COVID pandemic for the wine sector. So the exceptional measures that were put in place already will still apply in 2021. So producers affected by this measure will benefit from this extension.
Thank you. Are there other trade-related questions for Miriam today? Please only keep your hand raised if it's the case. No, I do not see any other trade-related questions, so we move on to other subjects. And Chiara, I think you had a question. Chiara, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you, Eric. I have a question on the Italian Recovery and Resilience Plan, because yesterday the government approved the Italian recovery plan, and I'd like to know where are we in terms of procedure, if the dialogue between the Italian authorities and the European authorities continues, and what happened next. And can you tell us if how many countries, if any, sent already the final plan? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question for Marta. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yes, hello. Apologies, I had some technical problems connecting. Do you hear and see me now?
Yes,
thank you very much. So thank you very much for your question. I can indeed confirm that we have remained in contact with the Italian authorities over the last few weeks. Discussions on the Italian Recovery and Resilience Plan continue. Of course, we are at a stage of submission of draft plans to the Commission because we are still waiting for the entry into force of the draft of the Recovery and Resilience Regulation. Once it enters into force, following some legal steps, Member States will be able to submit their plans, their finalized plans more officially. So that would happen in the next few months, hopefully. As regards the other plans, I mean, I can only say that for the moment we are in continuous contact with all Member States on their draft plans. And we, of course, encourage all Member States to submit them as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Marta on national recovery plans or economic issues more generally? That does not seem to be the case. Ah, Mathieu, sur ce sujet. Mathieu, tu as la parole.
Je saisis cette occasion, vous m'entendez?
Nous t'entendions. Pardon?
Est-ce que c'est bon?
Oui, maintenant c'est bon. Vas-y, Mathieu.
Ok, bonjour. Je saisis l'occasion. Le texte de la facilité pour la relance et la résilience demande à la Commission de plancher sur un mécanisme, une plateforme en ligne publique pour faire la lumière, notamment sur les plans de relance, mais surtout sur les bénéficiaires de subventions européennes. Donc, je voulais savoir si les travaux avaient commencé, comment vous allez vous y prendre. Merci.
Marta.
Merci Mathieu pour cette question. Effectivement, nous allons tout d'abord nous appuyer sur en fait l'information que les États membres doivent collecter au sujet des bénéficiaires des fonds du fonds de résilience. En ce qui concerne la question spécifique sur une publication sur notre site, je dois vérifier exactement ce qu'il en est et je reviens vers toi.
Merci. Je ne vois pas d'autres questions pour Marta. Je crois que Tommaso Galavotti avait une question. Tommaso, you have the floor.
Oui, merci, bonjour. C'est une question, je ne sais pas si c'est pour Marta ou pour la concurrence, parce que j'ai vu que sur la presse italienne a été finalement publié le plan industriel de Banca Monte dei Paschi di Siena qui n'avait été pas communiqué au marché, même si la banque est cotée à la bourse de Milan. C'est un choix bizarre du gouvernement italien, mais je voudrais savoir si vous avez reçu une copie de ce plan et si les chiffres qui sont inclus dans le plan il vous semble satisfaisant ou pas, parce qu'il y a une recapitalisation à faire et ça sera objet de négociation avec la Commission. Merci beaucoup.
Je pense que c'est une question pour Ariane.
Hi Eric, hi Tommaso. I would have to check this to be honest. So I would prefer to get back to you to see if this report has any impact on our ongoing decisions on MEPS.
Thank you, Ariana. Any other questions on competition for Ariana today? No. Any other issues you would want to raise with us today? That is, yes. Mas. Nous avons clôturé normalement le sujet relations extérieures, mais je t'en prie. Peut-être as-tu une question sur un autre
sujet. Oui,
c'est
pour c'est sur le commerce. Ça concerne la situation qui prévaut actuellement à l'Organisation mondiale du commerce. Et je ne sais pas si vous avez de nouvelles informations, parce qu'apparemment l'administration Trump semblait opposer son veto à la désignation de la Nigériane Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala pour le poste de directrice générale, laquelle avait obtenu le plus large soutien auprès des membres de l'OMC. Alors, entre-temps, bon, on sait ce qui s'est passé. L'administration Trump semble être conjuguée à l'imparfait. Alors, maintenant, est-ce qu'il y a une nouvelle donne? Est-ce que la Commission a des attentes? Est-ce que vous avez des informations sur la suite des événements? Quelle est la situation qui prévaut? Qu'est-ce que vous avez comme information par rapport à la situation actuelle suite à l'élection de M. Biden? Voilà.
Merci, Mas. Je passe la parole à Myriam.
Oui, je peux juste réitérer ce qu'on a dit dans la communication qu'on a publiée le 2 décembre de notre stratégie avec les États-Unis. La réforme de l'OMC est une priorité pour nous et pour cela, on va s'engager avec les États-Unis. Et dans le cadre de cette réforme, c'est très important d'avoir très vite un directeur général solide, expérimenté, qui puisse un peu donner la poussée pour amener cette réforme à bout. Alors, on est prêt à être en contact très vite avec la nouvelle administration qui va être en place à partir de la semaine prochaine pour discuter avec les États-Unis tous les sujets. Et bien sûr, la nomination de la nouvelle directrice générale sera un point important qu'on va traiter avec nos partenaires américains.
Merci, Myriam. Mas, tu as une question de suivi.
Vous comprenez bien, eh ben, vous avez probablement réglé la situation puisque la Nigériane s'inscrit parfaitement dans le cadre des réformes que vous souhaitez à l'OMC. Donc, je ne comprends pas pourquoi vous avez du mal à prononcer son nom et à la désigner du doigt et à montrer que c'est elle. Je ne sais pas qu'est-ce qui se passe, qu'est-ce que vous avez comme problème par rapport à la désignation de l'Africaine.
Mais je ne comprends vraiment pas le sens de ta question. Ça n'est absolument pas implicite ni explicite dans ce qu'a dit Myriam. Myriam.
Je voulais juste dire, c'est pas l'Union européenne qui nomme les candidats à la direction générale de l'OMC, c'est tout l'OMC qui doit nommer par consensus. Ce consensus n'est pas encore trouvé à cause des États-Unis qui n'étaient pas en faveur de la candidate nigériane, et comme les autres membres de l'OMC. Et on espère qu'on pourra s'engager, comme j'ai dit, avec la nouvelle administration pour trouver ce consensus et pouvoir nommer la nouvelle directrice générale.
Merci. Je ne vois qu'une seule main levée maintenant, celle de Nicolas. Donc Nicolas, nous te passons la parole. Ou je te passe la parole.
Oui, bonjour. J'avais une question pour Peter. Je suis désolé de le faire revenir sur le podium. Concernant la Libye et concernant la lettre du secrétaire général de l'ONU qui a demandé à l'Union européenne de fournir des moyens et des observateurs pour une mission d'observation du cessez-le-feu en Libye. Donc, je voulais savoir, je présume que vous avez reçu cette lettre et je voulais savoir quelle était la nature de la réponse que vous avez faire à Antonio Guterres.
Merci. Peter.
Merci Nicolas. Il n'y avait pas une réponse formelle encore parce que nous avons dit plusieurs fois comme l'Union européenne que nous sommes prêts à assister à tous les efforts pour mettre en œuvre la solution politique des conflits, de la crise libyenne. Nous sommes conscients sur les demandes, sur les réflexions du secrétaire général des Nations Unies sur la possible mission d'observation. Nous sommes prêts à continuer nos engagements et nos discussions avec les partenaires dans les Nations Unies pour voir les exactes modalités parce que le mécanisme pour l'observation ou vérification de cessez-le-feu n'est pas prêt encore. Donc, nous sommes en contact, nous sommes en discussion avec nos partenaires dans les Nations Unies pour voir les exactes demandes, les exacts besoins. Et selon les besoins, nous allons voir et réfléchir qu'est la meilleure forme de notre assistance et l'aide de l'Union européenne dans cette situation sur la vérification et sur le monitoring de cessez-le-feu.
Merci. I see that Alexandra, who has been having issues connecting, has now sent her question. Oh, sorry. We'll come back to you, Alexandra, afterwards. Nicolas, tu as une question de suivi.
Oui, excusez-moi. Est-ce que ça veut dire que je sens que dans ta réponse, vous n'êtes pas très chaud avec ce que propose le secrétaire général, parce que c'est assez précis. Il demande, par exemple, des moyens d'évacuation médicale, du soutien financier, des listes d'observateurs, pour ce que j'ai lu et compris. Est-ce que c'est que, en fait, vous estimez que ces modalités ne sont pas assez précises ou vous n'êtes pas tout à fait d'accord? Est-ce que c'est un point dont on va discuter, par exemple, au prochain Conseil des Affaires étrangères? Ou est-ce que c'est trop tôt? Merci beaucoup.
Non, je crains que l'interprétation n'est pas correcte. Ce n'est pas si nous sommes chaleureux ou non, ou froids sur les propositions. Ce que je dis, c'est un processus. Les discussions sont en cours. Nous sommes en contact avec les partenaires des Nations Unies, dans les Nations Unies, et à base de la spécification des besoins et des suggestions concrètes, nous sommes prêts à discuter et voir comment nous pouvons aider et assister, parce que c'est une chose très générale et fondamentale que nous sommes prêts à assister à les Nations Unies. Nous reconnaissons le leadership des Nations Unies dans les efforts pour trouver la solution en Libye, et nous sommes prêts à assister dans la forme plus appropriée quand nous voyons quand nous voyons les aspects concrets des demandes et des besoins. Donc, ce n'est pas une question de la chaleurosité de notre réponse, c'est seulement un processus pragmatique pour voir les faits, les besoins, et après, nous pouvons discuter la meilleure manière de nos soutiens.
Merci beaucoup, Peter. So I come back to Alexander's question on the US. And I quote, "There are only a few days left before Biden's inauguration. What is the most urgent issue on the transatlantic agenda? What do you have to fix first?" Peter, you want to have a go first?
Thank you. I think this was quite exhaustively answered by the Commission and the HRVP in December, at the start of December, when we suggested and put forward the joint communication on the transatlantic agenda for a global change. Then it was, of course, we had the Council conclusions from December when EU member states basically endorsed the suggestions and the areas where we should focus. So maybe if I could do a short digest of this, we are looking forward to working together with President Biden and his administration. We see an opportunity to design a new transatlantic relationship which is based on global cooperation and based on common values, common interests, and also taking into account the new geopolitical reality and economic situation, and where we see the areas of the strength and cooperation. These are like 4 areas, and one of them is the coronavirus response, meaning global health, then green leadership, trade and technology, and of course global action and security, including strengthening of multilateralism.
If I could add, in terms of urgency, I believe that everybody agrees that coming to terms, managing and overcoming the coronavirus pandemic is definitely the most urgent issue that we all have to face, each of us in our own territories, but also together. And it is clear that cooperating with the United States on this is definitely something that we will promote as quickly as possible with the new administration. Are there other questions on foreign relations for Peter, since he has come back on the podium? I do not see any. Thank you, Peter. Perhaps you will have to come back nevertheless, who knows. Catherine, I think you had a question for us.
Okay, so Eric, I've got a question. It's the second anniversary of the murder of Gdansk mayor Pavel Adamovich, And this was a mayor who was constantly accused of everything from being corrupt, being a traitor on the Polish public broadcaster TVP. And I'm just wondering, do you think that it's appropriate that large amounts of public money are given to a broadcaster when they run this sort of campaign, which clearly isn't a public service? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Catherine, and for reminding us of this sad anniversary, which allows us to remind everybody of our firm conviction of the need for a framework in the European Union where everybody is able to express their opinions, where debates can be held, and where democratic dialogue is the norm without any hint of threat of violence whatsoever. On your specific question, I pass the floor to Christian.
Yes, thank you, Catherine, for your question. I think we had the opportunity to exchange on this already a few times last year. I mean, what I can say on a more general level is, of course, to reiterate very strongly that media should be able to work freely and independently everywhere in the European Union. This, of course, lies at the heart of media pluralism. And let me add that, of course, public media play a special role and have a special responsibility in that context. And as I have said earlier this week in another context, we, of course, call on all member states to refrain from putting pressure on public media. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I see only one more hand raised, and it is from Tommaso Lecca. Tommaso.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Eric. Tommaso Lecca, AG News Agency. I also have a question about pluralism and freedom of expression, but from a different angle. Following the Capitol Hill, the disorders in Capitol Hill, Twitter suspended many accounts, both in the US, but also in Europe. I was wondering if the Commission have any data on how many accounts in the EU were suspended on Twitter, how many tweets eventually were deleted coming from EU citizens, and eventually if you have any other data on other social media, that would be very helpful as well. Thank you.
Johannes.
Thank you, Tommaso. Does it work? Thank you, Tommaso. I think we had the opportunity to exchange on the matter as such already early this week. So let me first reiterate that we, of course, are aware of all these decisions that you refer to, of platforms to suspend various accounts, and that this is primarily the responsibility of the platforms enforcing the terms of services. You also know that we have proposed a comprehensive legislative framework to ensure that the power of major platforms over public debate is subject to clear principles, transparency and accountability. Let me just say that at the beginning. Now, on the precise questions, no, we don't have these statistics. This is, of course, something you can ask from the platforms. But let me remind you that we have set up a process when it comes to COVID-related disinformation. So that's not directly related to your question, but more generally, of monthly reporting under the Code of Practice. So we receive monthly reports by the platforms. And there you see, let's say, disinformation-related patterns and statistics. But this does not directly refer to your question, but just to remind you that we publish these regularly, and there's a next one upcoming. But on your precise questions, no, this is something we need to ask from the platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Johannes on digital issues? No other issues for us today? It is not the case, so let me remind you that tomorrow there is no midday. On Friday, the college will be in Lisbon, or at least a delegation of the college will be in Lisbon for the meeting with the Portuguese presidency at the start of the presidency. There will nevertheless be a midday chaired by Dana. Thank you very much.